Hello everyone, Adrienne here. So today we're going to be doing a book review. I know a lot of you have been asking for it. So, new book review, it's going to be good. But before we get into that today, I did want to discuss something with you guys. So I wanted to add a quick aside as to why you are maybe not seeing as many book reviews from me for the past couple of years. So, as you guys may or may not know, my profession for the last year and a half has been as a phlebotomist. There are many days when my job, as any job in the healthcare field can be very physically and sometimes mentally exhausting. And especially for someone with ADHD, it's difficult to get me to sit down and actually absorb the contents of a book sometimes. I'm sure a lot of you guys can attest to that. So you know how ADHD brains are. You want to get them to do something and then they just won't. Why? Because. So most of the time I just want to come home and let my brain just exist peacefully rather than get engaged in a book. I do have some downtime at work depending on where I get assigned. And I try to take full advantage of it to either study my sheet music or read when I can. I'm also a really, really busy woman. I'm working full time. I'm practicing my music in my operatic study with my incredible voice teacher, getting ready to audition for the Seattle Opera, and that'll be later this year. And even writing my first original song, and on top of that, my endeavors in the world of absinthe, as you guys are pretty well aware at this point. So I do have a lot on my plate, and my brain doesn't always want to read. The few times the desire does come naturally, it has to be under really, really specific circumstances. So to those saying that they want me to do more book reviews, I hear you, I appreciate your support, and I'm slowly plugging away at books piece by piece. When I finish a book, I do a review. So and another thing too is that if we're talking from strictly the standpoint of analytics, on my YouTube channel, my book reviews just don't do as well in terms of views, engagement, and revenue as my content surrounding, say, my goth music reviews or my absinthe videos. So when I see a small handful of people asking for book reviews and it takes a long while to read the book and get everything together for the review in question, there is a reason for it. There's lots of time and effort invested that my brain isn't always willing to give for very little reward. So I appreciate you guys listening and thank you so much for understanding. You're going to see a lot of absinthe reviews in the near future. I'm sorry if that's not your thing, but I literally have almost 15 samples that I've received to review within the last month or so. So, gotta review them. I'm so sorry. So if you're not here for the absinthe reviews, sorry, but that's going to be happening in the next couple of months, I'm guessing. But I will try to interdisperse it whenever I am able to. So with all of that out of the way, let's have some fun and discuss some ghost stories. So today we are talking a little bit about ghost stories, which are a staple in Gothic literature. I find people often dismiss them as being boring or predictable, but I really, really disagree. I mean, Crimson Peak is tied with Silence of the Lambs as my favorite movie of all time. When ghost stories are done well, they're really, really good and they really stick with you. The ghost stories in this anthology are by M.R. James, who is known as a pioneer in the style of the English ghost story. Personally, I find ghost stories to be among the most fascinating in the Gothic genre because ghosts can take so many forms and have so many different motives and symbolize so many different things and tell so many different stories. Yes, I believe in ghosts, and I believe that storytelling using ghosts as a plot point aims the mirror back at ourselves, which I think is part of what makes them so terrifying sometimes. Ghosts look like us, but they don't at the same time. They communicate with us, but only when they have a secret to tell, reaching beyond the planes of existence to comfort us, warn us, or even terrify us when they seek vengeance in the afterlife. So now I'm going to give you a brief little tidbit of each story in this anthology, and I will give my final thoughts at the end. The first story is Canon Alberic's Scrapbook. This tells the story of Mr. Denistune, an Englishman on holiday in France, with the intention of taking photographs and sketches of the great cathedral in Bertrand de Comminges. To accomplish this, the cathedral's unhappy and seemingly nervous verger must guide him through. Strange laughter is heard from the tower above, and even though the verger seems to know and acknowledge it, he's very dismissive. At last, Mr. Denistune notices a strange painting captioned with how Saint Bertrand delivered a man whom the devil sought to strangle. The verger seems happy to part with a very old scrapbook in his book collection at home to give to the distinguished Englishman, but the image on the last page of the scrapbook reveals why he was so happy to part with it. Lost Hearts tells the tale of a young orphaned boy named Stephen Elliott sent to live with a cousin named Mr. Abney at his mansion in Lincolnshire. Mr. Abney is an eccentric alchemist hell-bent on making himself immortal. During his stay with his cousin in this large mansion, Stephen has many visions of a young bohemian girl and a little Italian boy whose hearts are mysteriously missing. In the mezzotint, Mr. Williams is the curator of a university art museum and has a strange mezzotint portrait dropped off by an art dealer. Little does the curator know the dreadful story of a vengeful, perhaps even murderous ghost attached to it. In The Ash Tree, there is a manor house of Castringham Hall in Suffolk, a strange tradition of mysterious deaths that plague the Fell family, starting with Sir Matthew Fell, a sheriff who hunted down an accused witch but later found his own demise as a blackened, bloated corpse. His son, years later, befalls the same fate, and the next generation, Sir Richard, is taken again in the same manner of death. The common thread is the ash tree outside Sir Richard's bedroom window. What secret or curse does it hold? Number 13 is set in the 16th century. The narrator's cousin stays at a Danish inn in Viborg. After being assigned to room 12, he realizes his room is becoming less and less furnished and even smaller at times, which is super strange. He hears a racketous one-man party in the room adjacent to his, and that would be room 13, except there's no room 13 at the inn. The guest insists that the innkeeper stay the night with him to corroborate what he's experiencing. They both hear some very sinister singing emanating from that room. But there is no room there. What could be happening between rooms 12 and 14? In Count Magnus, Mr. Raxel, an Englishman bound for Sweden to write a guidebook of the country for British readers, gets special permission to read some old documents belonging to a noble family. While reading these old documents, he becomes enthralled with an ancient ancestor named Count Magnus, and while passing his tomb, expresses a great desire to see the mysterious Count. Little does he know what a horrid fate awaits him if he should. A Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad tells the story of a young college professor while going on a golfing vacation who finds a mysterious old whistle while investigating some ruins of a Knights Templar preceptory. When the sun goes down, he blows the whistle and suddenly visions of a lone figure in a great empty land are conjured, and so is a mysterious wind. Soon the skeptical professor must come to terms with his lack of belief in the supernatural. Next, we have The Treasure of Abbot Thomas. Mr. Somerton, an antiquary hailing from Britain, deciphers a coded message pointing to a large treasure hidden somewhere in Germany. When he discovers it and takes it, a vengeful ghost will let him find no rest till it is returned to its rightful place. A School Story tells the story of two men in the dawn of the 20th century who sit together and discuss the folklore of the schools they went to. One of the men opens up about his experience about Mr. Sampson, a school teacher in the south of England specializing in teaching his students Latin, whose disturbing memories and dark secrets seem to permeate the lessons of his students. The Rose Garden tells the story of a middle-aged couple who move into a large house in the English countryside. The wife wants to create some gardens on the spacious grounds. However, a wooden post planted firmly in the ground is the only thing that stands in her way. The previous owner advised the couple that the desired place for the garden was supposed to be a spot for a summer home, and that her younger brother once prophesied his own death. After the post is removed, strange occurrences begin to unfold. In the tractate Midoth, an undesirable yet well-off clergyman named Dr. Rant makes two different wills, one favoring his nephew and one favoring his niece, and tells them the second one is hidden in a very old book that no longer is in his possession. 3 decades after his passing, the niece ceases her quest to find the book that contains her future. The nephew, however, will stop at nothing to locate the book that may destroy his good fortune. It seems to be in the grasp of a ghost who just won't give it up. Casting the Runes tells the story of Mr. Carswell, who submits a paper entitled The Truth of Alchemy to an association, and it is later rejected for consideration. Mr. Carswell inquires who made that decision and sets a curse upon them as vengeance for that rejection. In the stalls of Barchester Cathedral, a determined clergyman named John Haynes becomes an archdeacon after the accidental death of his predecessor. He never suffered the repercussions of a secret crime until he lays his hand upon a wooden figure in the cathedral, which has a particular spell placed upon it. Any murderer who touched it would suffer great tragedy. What lies in store for Archdeacon Haynes? In Martin's Close, an ancient trial transcript from 1644 reveals a very strange case. George Martin, a young man from a wealthy family, stands trial for the murder of Anne Clark, a poor, unappealing woman with low intelligence. Yet 2 witnesses are called for testimony, revealing that they saw Anne's ghost shortly after she was killed. Mr. Humphreys and his inheritance is involved with a man, obviously named Mr. Humphreys, and he inherits a mansion with very spacious grounds and a very strange labyrinth constructed by his great-grandfather. The previous inhabitant, Mr. Wilson, which is Mr. Humphrey's uncle, had locked the labyrinth long ago, and none have set foot in it for 40 years. Mr. Humphreys decides to explore the labyrinth, finding it easy to navigate sometimes and difficult at other instances, but is always accompanied by the eerie feeling of being watched. What secret does this labyrinth hold? So that is a brief summary of all of the short stories contained within this anthology. I hope at least one of them kind of caught your ear and piqued your interest. So I would say of all of these stories, my favorite ones were The Ash Tree, Casting the Runes, The Stalls of Barchester Cathedral, A Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad, and Mr. Humphreys and His Inheritance. Mainly because they really built up a lot of suspense and kind of like wondering and kind of speculation around these strange occurrences happening in each story, so that's just me. So I will say that these stories by M.R. James are different from what I was expecting. His spirits are very much attached to many material objects that still exist in the living world, be it books, labyrinths, trees, wooden posts in a garden, a singular charm on a watch chain, even a whistle. I will say, while the language and style of M.R. James is very accessible and not thick with old vernacular, I don't know if some days I was having a bad brain day while reading this book, but sometimes I did have a difficult time retaining the content of each story due to kind of losing track of the author's train of thought. But just for the sake of being generous, I'm just going to chalk it up to forcing myself to read on a bad brain day, because I kind of wanted to get this out there and done and over with, to be perfectly honest. So, that being said, if you are in need of more ghost stories in your collection, I definitely recommend you add this anthology to your library. I really enjoyed it. It was short and sweet, and I find that breaking into the Gothic genre via short stories is a lot less intimidating than breaking into it with, full-length Gothic novels, which tend to go on and on and on, in comparison at least. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video. It was a lot of fun. It was kind of nice to revisit the Gothic literature aspect of my channel, even if it happens infrequently due to my work schedule and whether or not my brain wants to cooperate. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening to my explanation in the beginning. you know, thank you so much for your support, and it really means a lot to me. So, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and make sure you hit that bell for notifications for more videos on Gothic literature, absinthe, and new goth music, and other miscellaneous things. And to my patrons, thank you so much for your support every single month. I really, really appreciate it, and literally couldn't do it without you. And to everyone, you're amazing, I love you, and I will see you guys later. Bye!